Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here today. Just to set a little bit of context, I've been doing social media for a long time, since it used to look like this. 25 years ago, where it was green text on a black background in my computer science lab at university, and people thought you were a little bit weird if you knew people online that you'd not met in real life. So that was the kind of context that I was working in, real kind of bleeding edge early adopter. I had my first web agency around about the same time. And I joke and I say, oh yeah, that was when the web was in black and white. It's actually not that far from the truth. That was back in the days when you couldn't even change the background color of a web page. Since then, things have changed. Social media is now more about this than the green text on the black background. Also very proud to be a Twitter early adopter as well, hence the 3-letter handle. Do follow me there, I'm entertaining. Since then, I've had a career that's been working with some amazing organizations and brands. I was really amazed to get to work on the launch of Sony Bravia across Europe, which involved flinging 250,000 bouncy balls down a hill in San Francisco. Not many people get to do that. The other great thing about that project was the brief. The marketing director of Sony gave us a 3-word brief: make Bravia famous. Brilliant brief, lovely project to work on. Since then, I spent 9 years working for WWF. That's the pandas, not the wrestlers. And my proudest moment there was working on this campaign, which was a campaign to make the ivory trade in Thailand illegal. It's a big kind of laundering, I guess you'd say, hub for ivory, illegal ivory. So I actually ran a global campaign that ended up with 1.6 million people calling on the Thai Prime Minister, who's that lady right there, to make the Thai ivory trade illegal. And we won that campaign. And this is our head of programs, our head of conservation programs, appearing on the steps of her building, making this kind of statement that it was going to become illegal. My second proudest achievement at WWF was this. I actually hold the claim to fame of being the inventor of the rhino emoji. So if you look on your phone now, you'll see there is a rhino emoji, and that's my fault. So my last campaign that I worked on before I left WWF was one called Endangered Emoji, which is all around using the 17 emoji that represent endangered species to raise awareness and funds for conservation. The thing was, at that time, there was no rhino emoji. And we saw loads of conversations from people that were supporting that campaign saying, why haven't you put the rhino in? You're always talking about rhinos. And we used some social listening tools. I was a Hootsuite client at the time. We used some social listening tools to put together a case to the people behind the emoji that appear on all of your devices and say, look, the people are asking. And they said, okay, you got it. Took a long time, 2 years later. This is my business card now. I'm called a principal consultant, which means nothing. What it actually means in practice is that I try and do this. I try and make our clients' eyebrows go up with surprise and interest because I'm telling something that they don't know already. And that's about the value of social media. It's about how social media connects to their business goals, not to their vanity goals, if you like, to actually things that their CEO cares about, their shareholders care about. How do we make that connection between their social activity and those kind of organizational goals? One of the best bits of what I get to do is talking to people. I've realized, I went through my list the other day, and over the last 2 years that I've been at Hootsuite, I've interviewed over 115 people. One of those is, well, at least one of those is in the room today with Anita from Ericsson, who I've actually interviewed twice now. She's a great client of ours and she's lovely to deal with. About 10% of the time that I interview people, I get this lovely reaction. I get to the end of the interview, it's generally fairly structured, and they say, oh, that was like therapy. So I think I've got a second career waiting for me when I'm fed up with this social media lark. But the thing is, when you kind of have that level of kind of connection to someone, you get really deep insights, which is wonderful. And I can use those insights to build a picture of social media within their organizations. And one of the stats that's coming out of those interviews is that 43% of those sort of senior digital and communications people that I talk to are kind of on this ongoing project of reviewing their strategy, either kind of building their social strategy or updating it for the next year. And the number one question that I hear is, how can we make sure that our social strategy is ready for next year? What are the challenges that we need to be thinking about now to get ready for, 3 months, 6 months' time? As Wayne Gretzky said, you need to be skating to where the puck is, not where it's going to be, not where the puck is. So that really is the sort of core question that I'm trying to answer today. And that breaks down into 3 that I think kind of really support a solid answer. So the first is rebuilding trust. How do we actually rebuild the trust in social media that's been damaged? The second is, how can we take advantage of stories? They're changing the landscape of social media today. And how do we as a brand take advantage of that? And the third one is, messaging seems to be taking over as well. How can we make, take advantage of these shifts in how people are using social media to actually work for us? So those are the 3 things I'm going to be talking about. So, rebuilding trust. So, as I'm sure everyone's aware, working in the social media space, 2018, 2019, not great years for social media. A lot of things happened, a lot of regrets, a lot of things that we regret other people doing, I should say. We need to look at, I'm not even going to say the words, you know what I'm talking about. Cambridge Analytica, that was a real tipping point. And we can see that manifesting even today in New Zealand with, some strong changes to change the role that Facebook have with their audiences. Twitter's had its big purges of bots, talk of interference with politics. And even yesterday I saw a kind of a campaigning cosmetics brand called Lush have said that they're going to sort of move out of the sort of traditional use of social media into much more of a community engagement style. So numerically, we're talking about a 66% drop in trust reported in the Edelman Trust Barometer, which is a huge thing. How can we make sure that we're kind of getting ahead of this and we're not caught in a position where, actually, we're the bad guys. I don't never want to be in that position. There's other issues around that as well. So this, at the time, was the most liked Instagram post from Selena Gomez. It's also the most expensive, with Coca-Cola paying over $500,000 for that post. So far, so much you'd expect. But as well as Coca-Cola, she's the face of a number of other brands. And people see this. Fans of Selena Gomez will see this raft of logos attached to her kind of presence and persona, if you like. If I had my way, I'd get them wearing their logos of who's sponsoring them for that sort of ultimate transparency. Also, side note, I'd like politicians to do this as well, but that's a different subject. So sort of 3 issues out of this. We're seeing tighter and tighter circles of trust. The kind of places that people look for kind of authoritative information online are really changing. And when we as brand communicators are looking to kind of reach people, that traditional influencer model, that's changing. I don't know how many people are here from B2C brands, but that sort of super A-lister, we're moving away from that. And then finally, kind of, how you're actually showing the success of this, that model of engagement, the numbers that we have been basing decisions on. And I think the chap from Diageo was kind of touching upon this earlier. We don't trust the platforms anymore. So how are we making sure that the activities that we're doing are measured in a consistent and reliable and meaningful way? So a couple of examples. ASOS, they're doing some great work. So this is really around that sort of, shrinking circles of trust point. So what they're doing is moving away from this sort of broad public engagement, and they're sort of focusing a lot of attention on smaller private groups. So these are organized groups that have a sort of specific topic that they're sort of engaged upon. So there's one around their sort of their campus activators. There's one around their plus-size audiences. These are sort of not big mass communications things, but this is how you kind of offer that sort of behind the velvet rope attitude to your customers and bring them into a special circle. And you can listen to them. And you can get more honest answers. You can give them sort of challenges. So I love this idea of asking your sort of elite super customers, if you like, to engage on things like outfit of the day and talk about your products through that medium. So, again, to that point that the BBC just made, joining a conversation that's happening. And then also you can see some fantastic content here that you can then amplify. Great, user-generated content for your broader channels. Close to my heart, in the charitable sector, breast cancer care. So they're doing something absolutely awesome. So rather than relying on, maybe the sort of the face of a celebrity who might have been affected by the issue, they're talking to their supporters, their audiences, sufferers of breast cancer, using the nurses that they employ. So these are people at the front line of delivery. So you see some of the videos they're creating, they're Facebook Live videos, so kind of quite unstructured, not really scripted, quite honest and open, giving them a theme, and it turns into a conversation. It's lovely. And that also means they get to really address some subjects outside of the typical. I don't know if you can see on the screen there, but even things like, you wouldn't normally expect them to talk about things like sex and intimacy, during and after suffering from breast cancer. So there's sort of a really brave approach with people that are intimately connected with the issue. Nokia, with apologies to Anita, they've done some great stuff, actually using their staff as sort of amplifiers and advocates. So how do you encourage this sort of army of people within your organization who you would hope would be the best sort of cheerleaders to talk about life within your organization? So they sort of center around Team Nokia. I don't know if any of you were in Ryland's talk earlier on about employee advocacy, but one thing that sort of, we, as we say, like to eat our own dog food. We use Hootsuite Life as Hootsuite's equivalent of this. And we've seen that this is not just kind of a warm and fuzzy impact, but actually we can track that approach to a reduction in cost to recruit new staff. We're rapidly growing, we're recruiting people all the time, and we're recruiting better staff, cheaper, by having our employees kind of talking about life at Hootsuite and kind of encouraging their friends, their networks to think about a career here. So hard numbers. So I laughed when I saw the first presenter this morning, second presenter, when he was saying that, you'll see a lot of jargon today. Micro-influencers is one of he pointed out. But moving from, the kind of fake influence to people that actually give a damn, that have authority to speak within an audience about a specific topic. Can you start or even sponsor a secret Facebook group? How can you create your kind of private army, if you like, you're giving that level of access to, or even join or support one that's got some velocity already? Are you using tools like Facebook Live to run regular questions and answer sessions? Ask Me Anything is a great tool to engage with people. Literally, ask me anything, I'll answer it for you. That level of transparency and openness. And then final point there, finding and activating your employee advocates as well, who can give you give your audiences a great insight to your organization. Okay, next point. How can we use stories? So, how many people have posted an Instagram or a Snapchat or a Facebook story in the last, during today? How many people here? Yeah. It is huge. So, it's quite the thing with the kids, I've been told. As I mentioned, I've been doing this for 25 years, which I'm very much not a kid. But Facebook themselves are seeing that stories are going to overtake the sort of interaction through the news feed at some point this year. The rate at which people are using this is increasing at 15 times faster than the rest of the sort of traditional Facebook platform, which is absolutely staggering. And you can see that isn't just a Facebook thing. Although as it happens, Facebook own 4 out of those 5 brands, so you can kind of see where they're going there. The actual number of daily active users is incredible. And why is this? Is it because it's a sort of a native mobile-only way of sharing? It's not just a mobile app. It's actually the kind of thing that's only possible when you start thinking about the shiny black mirror in your pocket. It's always with you. You know where it's going to be. It's got GPS. It's got a selfie camera. And you start thinking about what you're augmenting that with to make it more interesting. This is a very much a sort of a current way of communicating. So how can we as brands kind of take advantage of that without being awkward? I've got some examples of that in a second. So there's 3 things there. The first of which is the rise of lo-fi, this move away from the shiny, prepared social media the manicured and groomed approach to something more kind of low fidelity, grungy if you like, authentic. How can you do this with a format that's designed for the sort of more, one-to-one, one-to-small groups into a way that works at scale? Because as much as we would love to do this sort of one-to-one marketing approach, we just don't have time for that. And then the final point there, and I think has been mentioned out several times today, there's no point doing it if you can't then measure the impact. That impact point is interesting. It almost feels like a little bit like sort of the Instagrams and the Facebooks have kind of got a little bit caught out with this, the success of their approach. So they've got these great public-facing tools, but actually the way to measure and report on that, really weak. So how can we kind of adapt to that? A couple of examples. So The Guardian, brilliant. We love The Guardian. Big lefty here. But they've not just done it in that sort of typical Guardian way. They actually kind of took a bit of a test and learn approach to it. So they actually discovered that when they did the sort of more scripted approach, the more news-focused, editorially led, kind of shiny, if you like, approach, it didn't perform as well as those ones that are grabbed just with a mobile phone on the point of something happening, or even just a journalist talking to the camera, very much off the cuff. This has had sort of significant impact. So this means that over the last 4 months of last year, they had a growth of from 860,000 to 1 million followers on Instagram. And as much as it's not just about the number of followers, you can see that that's the effects paying off. The army, the British Army, I should specify. So this was an interesting one. So I've been doing a lot of work with the Ministry of Defence over the last few months. They're a big client of ours, really interesting client. And I was talking to their head of digital at an event, and he was talking about the fact that they were using Instagram stories. I said, Matt, his name's Matt. I said, Matt, is this not a little bit like a dad dancing at a wedding? You've got this sort of organization that's several hundred years old who are, being down with the kids and kind of using these the GIFs and the hashtags layered over stuff. And he was like, no. You'd think it would be, but actually the engagement rates have been through the roof. And yes, engagement is, can be a slightly soft metric, but actually when you look at the impact that's had on, the number of people expressing an interest in joining the army, it's been one of the factors that's seen that sort of rise quite significantly. And they spend millions of pounds on, paid media to generate those expressions of interest. So by taking this more innovative approach, they're getting very effective social media reach. It's not all just about what you post either. So I don't know if anyone saw this last year. This was Dunkin' Donuts, Valentine's Day activation last year. So becoming part of other people's stories, giving little branded stickers that lets, people express their love for other people, maybe their love for donuts within a Dunkin' Donuts branded context. Quite cute. So a few things there. Get in early. This is, I've got to say the early in this is probably more like early. It's getting towards maturity. So definitely think about it if you're not. In terms of tracking, make up for the platform's shortfalls, but making sure you're putting your own tracking. So when people are interacting with stuff and going through to your website from that story, you can see exactly where they've come from. And then finally, look at ways of supporting this. Using custom GIFs or anything like that. And we've actually done this as well. So we love our Hootsuite Owly. So if you look on Giphy, you'll see a whole ton of our Hootsuite Owly sort of showing off and doing silly things, which is lovely. Final point, is messaging taking over? So this is indicative of a broader shift, if you like. And I think it's very much coupled to that first point around trust. The shift away from the mass, to the private. If I'm a person that's sort of in that social space now, I don't want to be quite as much feeling like I've got Big Brother over my shoulder all the time. I want to move away from that sort of big public space. And people are taking refuge in private groups, in WhatsApp, in Messenger, and this is reflective of that. And we can see it in the numbers. We see that people are spending more time in messaging apps. We can see that the top apps these days, include significant numbers of messaging platforms. So all the dark blue ones there, check the screen calibration. All the dark blue ones there are specific messaging apps. So you can see in terms of those active account numbers, they're off the charts. So how can we not exactly reach into these private spaces, but how can we support this behavior? We don't want to ignore it and just talk to people on normal Facebook and Twitter and Instagram as we've been doing for the last few years, because we will lose relevance. How can we support those better one-to-one experiences that people are demanding? I know I'm absolutely loath to ever phone someone to get customer support when I can get it on a messaging app, because I know that it's not going to waste my time. I know that I can do it when it suits me. If they don't answer straight away, probably doesn't matter. And that sort of feels to me like a more trusting, modern way, engaging way of doing it. So we've talked about that retreat to private spaces. When we're managing this need to kind of communicate one-to-one, there are many different platforms, and we don't want our community engagement team kind of flicking between 17 different windows or mobile apps to be able to do this. So how can you pull all that into a single kind of unified inbox and sort of integrate that with your core customer service platform? And then the final point there about the rise of AI and bots, quite often seen as a bit of a scary thing. A few people today have been talking about how you mitigate the whole kind of rise of AI, but actually it can be useful. How can we take advantage of these ways to kind of reduce our workload, increase our efficiency with the robot overlords? A couple of examples. So Sephora. They've been doing some great work in sort of reducing friction in people booking. Any Sephora customers in the room? Yeah, a few. You use the mobile app or the Messenger app? You should. So what they've done is actually move their booking flow into Messenger, so that you can, they know who you are because you're logged in through Facebook, and you can now kind of step through that booking process without engaging with any of their human beings. And they've seen this as kind of really increased that number of bookings significantly. Like 11% more bookings, that's a chunk of revenue. And by reducing friction, people are more satisfied as well, which means you're going to get repeat bookings as well. It's lovely. KLM is actually, if I'm talking about using messenger bots, this is my absolute favorite. So they were one of the first organizations to really do a great job on the integration. So it's not just, we got a messenger bot. It's, we've got a messenger bot that's actually integrated with our booking system and our CRM platform. Again, because they know who you are, they know what you've booked through them, you can interact with your booking through the messenger bot in real time. Super smart. And also, by the way, supports 12 languages. So this isn't just that sort of usual English-first approach. But, a word of warning. Does anyone know what the uncanny valley is? Has anyone seen this graph before? So the uncanny valley, this comes from animation and robotics. So this is some research that shows that as you go into a representation of a person that gets more and more human-looking, you like it more and more, up till this point, when it gets a little bit too human, and then all of a sudden you hate it, and you want it to die in fire. And then it turns into an actual human, and you like it. So Captain Incredible, he's awesome, but he's not very human. He's got the big jaw and the big muscly body. But you look at some of these creepy, the robot's the one on the left, by the way. You kind of look at it and go, oh, no, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. So you can kind of think of it that, on the far left-hand side in social media terms, you've got the Big Ben clock that every hour goes bong. You've got kind of that automated dispatch email from UPS or FedEx that puts your name at the top. You've got your best mate, who's obviously totally likable. And then way down in this trough here, you've got bad messenger bots. So here's an example of one. I won't name who it was, but you imagine sort of logging on saying, share your commands. And it comes back with it's like going back to 25 years ago with the green text on the black background. It's like, okay, I'm a human being. What do I do with that? It carries on and on. I just wouldn't ever go next to this again. So, and on again. I forgot the last click. Just no, absolutely not. So what can we do with that? So firstly, we can actually think about how we can use messaging within our campaigns. You know, as a first step, if you want to get involved in this, there's loads of bot builder platforms that let you set up something like a frequently asked questions kind of flow. It's pretty easy. I set them up for clients before I started at Hootsuite, which kind of took me maybe a couple of hours to have a workable prototype. And then finally there, you know, also a great platform to do some paid ads. You know, at the moment, they're pretty cheap, pretty impactful. Be careful though, because they can be very invasive. So if you use them badly, I would say this is something that I would almost exclusively use with existing audiences, rather than trying to reach into sort of new cold audiences. And then finally, don't be creepy. So thank you very much. I'm going to just sort of sum up a little bit what we talked about. So I think we talked about how we rebuild trust, how we kind of adapt to this storified future, how we adapt to messaging eating the world. And I'll also say that these three are part of a larger series of 5 changes. And I think they are changes. These aren't trends. You know, this isn't about your VR strategy from a couple of years ago. This is actually how we're kind of adapting to a new future. And then we're also talking about how we're then getting our ad creative stronger, more impactful, and kind of more rapidly adapting to our audience's preferences. And then, you know, how we're then tying e-commerce into our social media. Now, these all form part of our 2019 social trends. So I would absolutely urge you, if you haven't already seen them, we're going to distribute the link. I'll tweet the link as well. You know my Twitter profile because I put it at the beginning. So I'll tweet these links out, and you can download the full report, which has a lot more juice behind it, and hopefully you'll find that useful and help you get ready for 2020.